Yeah.
Thanks very much, Fiona. I'm just going to try sharing the screen. Let's see if this works. So hopefully you should be seeing slides. Oh, this is kind of difficult to do the slideshow thing because of the bar at the top. There. Are you seeing the slides now?
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Us.
That's good.
Great. This is working. Cool.
Great picture.
That's a good start. Yeah. So I thought, Fiona, you'd enjoy this picture. So this is from the top of the Tower Cafe in Dundee, which I very much wish we could take you to because it's got an incredible view. I think this picture was probably taken, I think I took it when Lorraine took me up to the top of the Tower Cafe on my very first day working in Dundee, which was just under a year ago, actually. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm quite new to the educational developer world in general. I just finished a PhD about a year ago, started work at Dundee last August. And so I'm very new to this world. This is my second shed, I think, and also very new to online teaching. So the thoughts I'll present today are, as I'll say, very much what Susie was talking about with the thoughts of doctor new to this. So yeah, be presenting a lot of the kind of asynchronous teaching we've been doing recently, and both the things that have worked well and the mistakes we've made. So my kind of the aims and outline for this session, be about 20 minutes of talking, and then I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. So my intention is to be as practical as possible. So Susie gave us a big institution level picture of what's going on at Dundee. I'm going to only talk about a very small corner of things, like what we've been doing in the Academic Skills Centre in some of our teaching. I'll talk about some of the lessons learned. So some of the things we tried, things that worked, things that didn't work. So a lot of what we were talking about earlier about mistakes made and, you know, good enough, that sort of thing. I'll go through 3 different case studies. So the first is some emergency teaching that we did as part of our Step Up to Transitions module, which is a credit-bearing module for college students who are starting university direct entry second year. So we had to shift that online in response to the COVID-19 pandemic kind of, so emergency teaching. And then a session I did for honours nursing students, a 1-hour session on writing, and then a session I did a few weeks later for the BA in Childhood Practice programme, again on essay writing. So go through these 3 case studies and sort of talk about what I learned each time and kind of how we've been building on it. And then, yeah, as Susie said, I just added this to my slides. This is very much the adventures of Doctor new to this. We're not looking at, I'm not going to present, this is how you should do your online teaching. I've only been doing this for about 2 months. So my aim here is for that, those of you who are also newbies like me, hopefully this will provide some ideas and perhaps some inspiration. And then for those of you, like many of you are, who are much more adept to some of this stuff and you've been doing this for years and you're experts in it, hopefully this provides a sort of picture of what it's like just starting out, and seeing the sort of mistakes that I've been making will hopefully help you to better support your academics who are probably making some of the same mistakes. So let's dive into round 1 of emergency teaching. So like I said, this was part of our Step Up to Transitions module, which is a credit-bearing module in semester 2. And when we had to transition online suddenly at the end of March, we had 2 3-hour classes left that then needed to get moved online. So like many people did, I kind of just came at this with whatever I had, sort of. So I started with PowerPoint because I understood how to use PowerPoint. And I made a few videos using PowerPoint because that seemed to be the easiest thing. I know I probably should use things like Yuja or Panopto, but as Lorraine and Anne-Marie can tell you, I despise Yuja, or essentially I don't know how to use it. So training is maybe needed. Anyways, so I made some PowerPoint videos. I found some external links. You can see on the screenshot there, I've got a TED talk and I've got a blog, so external links for the students. And I also relied on the VLE discussion boards. Since this was an accredited module, it has a whole VLE space that the students were at least somewhat used to. And so you can see there in the screenshot, sorry it's so small, there's some instructions at the top of what they should do. Then they should like watch a video, look at the external links, And then I asked them to go post their top 3 takeaways on the discussion board, and then reply to at least one of their peers' posts. So what worked? What actually was okay about this? So the structured engagement approach I thought worked quite well. So being quite specific about the exact things the students were supposed to watch and look at, and the exact way they were supposed to engage with activities and posting on the discussion board and responding to their peers' posts, that that worked quite well. We've probably heard a lot about things like flux pedagogy at the moment, where in times of crisis, we really, really need structure. So I was a bit more structured and rigid than I might normally have been, but it seemed to have fairly good results. Quite a lot of students engaged and they posted good stuff. So the module has about 20 students in it, and I think about 15 of them did indeed engage on the discussion boards, which, considering this is actually an optional module for them, they didn't even need to pass. I think that's a reasonably good engagement rate, so I'm happy with that. And also, I'm fairly happy with the mix of created and curated resources. So something Susie mentioned earlier, that we can pull things from outside. We don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. And people who know me will know that I love to reinvent the wheel and I love to just make things, but sometimes that's not the best idea. So I'm actually quite proud of myself looking back at this, seeing that I did use external stuff. I didn't just try and do it all myself. So I made a few videos so the students could see a familiar face. And I also picked a few good sources from outside and mixed those together. I think that mix worked well. So what did we learn? What things could have gone slightly better? Firstly, so when I started doing this, I tried uploading my videos as PowerPoint files, which, as most of you probably know, is a terrible idea. So I thought that I could just record myself over the PowerPoint and then upload that and the students would be able to play it, which, surprise, surprise, they can't. They have to first download the PowerPoint and then play that on their computer. And with all of this discussion about do students have adequate technology? Do they have adequate bandwidth? Getting students to download large files, because we're talking about files of 200 or 300 megabytes here, that simply isn't accessible. And say if they're accessing it on a mobile phone, it may not play a PowerPoint anyways. So I quickly learned that I needed to go an extra step farther and turn my videos, like export them into actual video files, which could then be uploaded and streamed. This sounds like a really simple thing, a really silly mistake, but it was quite stressful and time consuming at the time. So we're thinking about that people who are not as used to this sort of stuff as we are, maybe making this exact sort of mistake. And along that note, I also started far too late. So when I'm doing my in-person teaching, I quite enjoy doing my prep kind of as close to the teaching as possible, so it's really fresh in my mind. But this just doesn't work with the asynchronous teaching. So I think I started filming the videos at about 10 in the morning when I wanted to have the session up by about 1. And needless to say, after the filming and the rendering and the exporting and the uploading on my incredibly slow broadband, it was probably 3 or 4 in the afternoon before it was actually up. And I'd been fairly stressed, and also because my broadband is incredibly slow, I wasn't able to actually do anything else on my computer the entire day while the files were uploading. So what I've started doing since then is starting about a week in advance of the session and then making the videos and trying to upload them overnight when my broadband is a bit quieter. So I don't know, if perhaps your broadband might be faster than mine, but if it is on the slow side, the overnight trick has kind of been my lifesaver recently. So that's round 1. Let's head into round 2, which is this nursing project. So it was a 1-hour session on writing a nursing honours project. And this is a session I had run for a previous cohort several months before. I was then scheduled to do this session just right after the lockdown started. So we decided to move it online instead. And in person, it had been quite an interactive session, lots of discussions, lots of activities, and I didn't want to lose that online. So we didn't have a VLE because I was just doing a one-off thing. So I had to find a way of getting the students to do activities without that. So what I did was I turned my slides into 6 short videos, kind of 5 to 15 minutes. And I realized that 15 minutes is still a bit on the long side, but this is better than my like 20, 25-minute videos of the previous one. So we're getting shorter. And then I also created a workbook to go along with these videos. So this workbook was available online in OneDrive, and it was in Word or PDF formats. The students could download it and they could watch the videos on YouTube, and then as they reach the various activities, they could go to their workbook and do the activities. So not optimal for students using a mobile phone, but reasonably accessible if you're on a laptop. So what worked well? And the first thing was that in this case, the collaboration with the academics worked really well. So we talk a lot about working with our academics. And in this case, the workbook, for instance, was developed alongside with the program leader. So I shared the slides, he gave some comments, and I shared the workbook. He talked to me about it, and we kind of worked together on that. So what we ended up with was a session that was very precisely tailored to the needs of these exact students for this exact assignment. So I thought that worked quite well. Also, it was available over time for the students to kind of access whenever. And for the first few days after I uploaded the video, I felt a bit concerned, a bit anxious, because there weren't very many views on the videos. But then over the coming weeks, the views sort of climbed as the deadline approached. And one thing that was interesting is that initially the first couple of videos had a high number of views and the later videos didn't so much. But then as the time went on, the later videos started to climb as well. So it seemed like students were engaging kind of in bits. They would watch a few videos, then come back later and watch a few more videos. So that's worth thinking about with asynchronous teaching, that students may not even do a full session at once. So those things worked well, but what did we learn? What sort of things could we do better? And the one thing is measuring engagement. And I know we had a slight discussion earlier about some of the perhaps scary side of the data analytics stuff. But here, just on a measuring engagement to figure out if what we're doing actually worked for the students. And in this case, it was quite easy to track views on YouTube, and YouTube analytics does all sorts of things, showing me, did a student watch it all the way through? Did they just watch 30 seconds of it? So that was quite helpful. But the workbook, I just don't know anything about, because it was on OneDrive and I don't know how many students engaged with it. I don't know how they engaged with it. I don't know if they did the activities, if they even looked at it. So that aspect of the this little course I designed isn't ideal, because it's just a big black hole of knowledge that I have no idea if the students engage with it. And on that, this whole thing was actually also quite time consuming and it wasn't transferable. So even though I'd run this exact same session a couple months earlier, so I already had the slides, I already had the activities, just trying to put it all into this format of videos and a workbook probably took about 10 hours of work. And considering that this little mini course is designed specifically for honors nursing students doing a particular assignment, perhaps 10 hours of work for that is perhaps a bit too much. It's not really feasible to be doing this every time we need to do an hour of teaching. So I really needed something where I could measure engagement better. It took a bit less time and preferably was a bit transferable to other things. So enter round 3, this Essay Essentials course. And here's a few screenshots of what it looks like. So this was, again, an hour-long session that I had taught a couple of months ago for the Childhood Practice Programme. So I already had the slides and the activities, and they asked me to transfer it online for the next cohort of students. So this case, I made videos again. So here you can see a video on academic tone hosted on YouTube. I've got a lovely little penguin that our learning technologist friends drew. So working on the branding here. And then I also have activities using Microsoft Forms. Now I realized that if I was doing this on a VLE, there'd be all sorts of ways of integrating quizzes and activities on the VLE, but forms seem to be one of the best ways of doing it off the VLE. So this way the student would watch the video, then click on the form and do a little, like answer a few questions. And then when they submitted that, then I could see what they wrote, which was really helpful. And I hosted this all on the Wakelet platform, which is free software that allows you to kind of collect things in together. So put text, put videos, put forms, images, whatever. So I was fairly proud of how this looked, and I'll talk a little bit about what worked and what didn't about this one as well. So what worked about this? Firstly, this approach was quite transferable, but also tailored. So the videos were all generic. This video on academic tone, for instance, I think it used examples about penguins because I thought that was funny. And it wasn't intended specifically for any program. This same video could be watched by any student across the university. But I didn't want to have just a totally generic course because, especially according to things like the academic literacies model, we're trying to induct students into learning in their discipline, not just transferable skills in general. So I followed up these generic videos with tailored activities. So when the student clicks on the Microsoft Form activity, they'll be brought to an activity about academic tone that will be using examples from their program. So these forms they can also work on with the academics and make that tailored as possible. So another thing I think worked well about this was that it was very activity-based. It wasn't just students watching some videos, but they would watch videos or read text or whatnot, and then do activities. They would be asked to actively learn and to be working through the, sometimes even during the video, I'd ask them to pause the video and do a little bit of the activity, watch a bit more video, go back to the activity. That would be harder on a mobile, but definitely possible on a laptop. This version also was much better for feedback. So whenever a student did an activity and then submitted the form, I would be able to see what they wrote. So I could tell, like the data was anonymous, I didn't have the student's name, but I could see if they seemed to be getting it or not. So I could find ways that I could tweak the course and make it a bit better next time. I also put a form for student feedback at the end of the course as well, so that we could kind of get the general feedback on the whole course. Also, once students submitted their forms, on the sort of thank you for submitting screen, I'd give them a link to another video or another document that they could click on, and that would share some kind of general thoughts on the activity they'd just done. It wasn't tailored feedback to them because that would be far too difficult and too time consuming to provide feedback on each student who does it. But it was sort of general potential feedback on the assignment. So they could sort of do it and then kind of get the sort of benefit from a kind of plenary discussion, as it were, afterwards. And finally, I think this whole approach was quite user-friendly. It's really, like Wakelet looks good on a mobile. It's all nicely contained. The students just follow one link to Wakelet. They just scroll down, work through the activities in order. You click on the YouTube video, it sort of pops up, they play it, click on the form, it pops up, they fill it in. It's all very easy to access. There are no logins. So if a student is off campus and working on a mobile, they don't need to go through a login again. It's very easy to follow and very simple and straightforward. So what did we learn? What are the things that weren't ideal about this approach? So there's things like tracking engagement. While things like the forms were quite helpful, there isn't also a way of, if a student, say, started filling in the activity on the form but didn't submit it, I can't see that. I can only see it if a student filled in the form and submitted it. So I don't know how many students may have done the activity but not wanted to send their answers off to me. That's one thing. Two, views on Wakelet are a bit fiddly. Like every time I refresh the Wakelet, it adds my view again, which is incredibly frustrating. So it's hard to track how many times the students have viewed it because my views are stuck in there as well. And the most frustrating thing is that on when a student views a video through Wakelet, it then doesn't count that video view on YouTube. So several of the videos I made specially for this, if you go to see them on YouTube, it says they have 0 views, which is a lie because I got my husband to test it. use it, and you watch the video through Wakelet, and I know the video has been watched, but it still says 0 views. So this doesn't matter if you're using an external video and you don't really care if the view gets counted or not. But if you're using your own videos and you do want to track video analytics, Wakelet isn't ideal. So at this point, I'm starting to look at things like Adobe Spark, which I love for other things. I'm going to test that for videos. And also Microsoft Sway, which Anne-Marie is a big fan of. So talk to Anne-Marie about that. I'm going to start testing that because Sway has very good analytics. So other than all this engagement analytics stuff, there's also the point that some of you are possibly thinking already that there's a danger in this of setting things up with a bit of a single point of failure, where, so the YouTube I've been using is an account I created with my email address. The Wakelet account is one I created with my email address. The forms are currently only visible by me. So it's worth thinking about with all of these things, setting them up with accounts or email addresses that are accessible from more than one person. So forms can be shared, but I think we need to start looking at, say if we're uploading videos, making sure they're accessible to multiple people. So, so let's close briefly by thinking about next steps. What sort of things are we experimenting with? Firstly, peer connection. You'll probably have noticed that I didn't talk at all about sort of peer connection at this point. So a lot of what I've been asking students to do is to watch something or read something and then complete an activity. So especially when you're not working in a VLE area and don't have access to discussion boards, I'm interested in finding new ways of getting students to collaborate on things, whether that might be through, say, a shared OneNote notebook, or through collections on Wakelet, through Teams, through Google Docs, Padlet, those sorts of things. So worth building those into our asynchronous teaching to create a sense of community. Then there's also, I'd like to start exploring about how to integrate this asynchronous content delivery with synchronous sessions. So how do we best deliver content in kind of an asynchronous environment and then effectively build on that in a collaborative synchronous session? And finally, improving uptake. So from what I can tell, the uptake on some of these things hasn't been quite as high as I would have liked or expected, perhaps. So it hasn't been as high as it has been in an in-person session. So I'd like to know more about why that is. Is it simply because at the moment we're working in a crisis scenario and maybe academic tone isn't the students' top priority at the moment? But so is there something that we can be doing that would better serve the students' needs? So how can we improve uptake and so better support the students? So that's all I have to say for now. I would really love to hear your thoughts. So thank you very much.
Wow, Rachel, that was fabulous. Before I forget, can we open our mics and just say thank you for that? Because that was really, really good.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Rachel, that was inspirational. And you know, the bit that I kept hearing was how you were looking at the different platforms, the different media, and thinking about inclusion. It was this voice just kept going through. It was lovely. We've got time for a couple of comments or questions. Can I open the mics for people?